L'evento di oggi quindi nasce nel contesto di questa iniziativa, è l'iniziativa con cui il CMCC dà evidenza e premia le migliori iniziative sulla comunicazione dei cambiamenti climatici nel mondo. È un'occasione non solo per premiare i più validi progetti, ma anche per creare connessioni, creare network, creare occasioni di incontro e di contaminazione tra i vari progetti e tra gli autori dei vari progetti per progredire tra professionisti della comunicazione in diversi settori. Un percorso che ci ha portato dalla COP27 in Egitto a Sharm el-Sheikh, quando abbiamo lanciato la Call for Proposals del concorso di quest'anno, e ci ha accompagnato per tutto l'anno fino ad oggi con iniziative di diverso genere, di comunicazione, soprattutto gli eventi online Foresight Dialogues, di cui questo è il conclusivo per questa parte del concorso, in cui abbiamo potuto vedere a confronto diversi tipi di approcci alla comunicazione, dalla comunicazione del clima a livello pubblico-politico al confronto sul coinvolgimento del pubblico. Abbiamo avuto esperti di disinformazione, abbiamo avuto un confronto sul ruolo della scienza, ma anche della semiotica, dell'educazione. E in questa edizione del concorso abbiamo ricevuto il doppio del numero di application rispetto all'edizione precedente del 2021, quando avevano applicato circa un centinaio di progetti, e abbiamo una rappresentanza molto ampia di circa 52 paesi, e così la piattaforma che potete trovare su cmccaward.eu è animata ora da più di 300 progetti che in tutto il mondo si occupano proprio di comunicare e di divulgare i cambiamenti climatici, spaziando dall'arte, intesa come arte visuale, arte teatrale, musicale, a produzioni audio e podcast, a giochi, gaming, campagne integrate di comunicazione, contenuti editoriali, dove ci stanno libri, ci stanno racconti, fumetti, giornalismo, eventi, foto e video, un panorama molto ampio di progetti che sono molto stimolanti, che creando questa rete vanno anche a contaminarsi. La giuria di quest'anno è stata composta, oltre che da Jeff Biggers, che abbiamo appena nominato, da Carolina Aragon, artista di Boston, Massachusetts, che ha vinto il concorso dell'edizione precedente con un'installazione artistica. Mauro Buonocore, il direttore delle attività di comunicazione al CMCC, Giuseppe La Spada, water artist, che abbiamo in sala e che tra poco inviterò a raggiungermi, e Fiona MacDonald, visual anthropologist alla University of British Columbia. E questi esperti che hanno composto la giuria hanno valutato tutti i progetti pervenuti e ammessi al concorso secondo dei criteri definiti come l'innovazione, il potenziale di impatto, la capacità di raggiungere nuovi ampi pubblici, ma anche e soprattutto l'affidabilità delle informazioni e il basarsi su dati e informazioni scientifiche. Tutto questo prende però un nome ben preciso, che è quello di Rebecca Ballestra. Rebecca era un'artista scomparsa prematuramente alcuni anni fa, che ha dedicato la sua vita professionale artistica a un'arte che permettesse di favorire una transizione ecologica e uno sviluppo sostenibile. E aveva questa visione, quella di creare un network, una piattaforma che portasse insieme, che mettesse insieme diverse esperienze, condividesse la conoscenza e cercasse di trasformare il nostro futuro. Rebecca quindi aveva questa visione ed è un po' quella che stiamo portando avanti con questo concorso, che viene promosso dal CMCC, che è un centro di ricerca, e quindi mette insieme un po' questa visione di Rebecca con poi l'affidabilità delle informazioni basate sulla scienza. passo la parola a Jeff Biggers, membro della giuria del CMCC Award, per la conclusione di questa iniziativa con l'annuncio del vincitore.
I have the honor to announce the award, Rebecca Balestra Award for 2023, the Climate Change Communication Award, Rebecca Balestra 2023. And the jury, which is comprised of artists and scholars from around the world, this year decided to give the award to the Council on Energy and Environment and Water, which is based in New Delhi, India, for their series of films called Faces of Climate Resilience. This is the citation from the jury this year. Faces of Climate Resilience conveys a powerful message of resilience through the art of filmmaking, focusing on some of the most marginalized community and climate vulnerable areas in India. The project gives voice to those at the forefront of the impacts of climate change. The short films help expand our understanding not only of how climate change is affecting the most vulnerable communities, but it also demonstrates the role of local knowledge and action in strengthening vulnerable communities' resilience to the impacts of the climate emergency. Through storytelling as a poetic approach, Faces of Climate Resilience humanizes climate communication in the true spirit of Rebecca Balestra's work, in line with her project Journey to Fragility, which emphasized both environmental and social aspects of climate change and looked into human interventions and responsibilities toward the natural environment. So congratulations to the Faces of Climate Resilience. And we have us now, Milan Jacob from India to discuss now his award. Thank you.
Everyone. Thanks, Mr. Biggers. This is indeed a great honor that Faces of Climate Resilience has been selected as the winning project for the CMCC Climate Change Award this year. I'd like to give a special mention to the India Climate Collaborative, the Edelgate Foundation, and Ropka Films, and my colleagues at the Council, without whom this would not have been possible. I'll also quickly load my presentation. Okay, so my name is Milan Jacob and I live and work in Delhi, India. I'm a communications specialist with the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, which is abbreviated as CEEW and also referred to as the Council. We are a not-for-profit independent public policy research think tank. The Council uses data, integrated analysis and strategic outreach to impact sustainable development at scale. At the core, we are a research organization which is working towards certain systemic transformation with the help of key enablers. Alongside, we work on critical elements for improving the quality of life while ensuring a sustainable future. The areas on which we primarily focus are currently visible on screen. I'll talk about the Faces of Climate Resilience project by speaking a bit about my own journey at the Council. So I joined the Council in 2019, and the climate change discourse was only something I passively followed at that point. I previously worked in public health, and I was a journalist prior to that. So the Council's research was new to me and often quite daunting, to be honest, at that point. It was only topics like air pollution and climate risks that were a bit more relatable compared to a lot of other areas of work. So that was also a time when the Council's climate risks research was expanding. The team was building a first of its kind climate risks atlas for India with granular level data at the sub-national level. And that was a piece of work that I followed very closely. When the initial research from that project was published, as you can see some data on the screen, it was clear that we had the best-in-class data and analysis, and it also made me realize the extent of India's climate vulnerability problem. But the question was, how do we humanize this and make this data more relatable beyond the academic and the policy circles where this conversation generally happens? And I was also quite keen on using my anthropological training to look at climate risks from the perspective of the most vulnerable people and build a narrative around them. So as I started my research for the project and dug deeper into the communication problem that we were trying to solve here, I realized that it was the voices of experts and journalists that dominated mainstream climate communication. So they focused primarily on the current and potential impacts of climate change, with the narratives invariably creating an atmosphere of doom and gloom and largely presenting a global north perspective. The success stories or those examples of ingenuity when one is to adapt to challenges with minimal resources were more or less missing from the narrative. And that was precisely where the idea of humanizing climate risks through stories of resilience was born. Our research and data clearly indicated the most climate vulnerable regions in India. So we decided to go to those regions and explore how people adapted and responded to this crisis, especially using their traditional wisdom and nature-based solution. When the idea was floated, we weren't even sure what the stories we would find would be, but we were confident that the communities would be building resilience in their own ways. So we eventually found these stories from different parts of India, from 5 states to be very precise. And India being a country which is so diverse and probably even more diverse than all of Europe put together, so to speak. So the stories we covered were from across the country, from the northern, southern, central, and the western regions. The stories, to give you a few examples, included a women's collective in the state of Odisha, as you can see on the screen, planting casuarina trees along the coastline to prevent seawater intrusion and the impact of frequent cyclones. There was another example of a youth group in Mumbai, in suburban Mumbai, which was sensitizing slum dwellers about climate change and its impacts through street plays and other similar awareness generating activities. There was another women-led group in the state of Uttarakhand in northern India, which is the home of the Himalayas. They were working very closely with local forest officials in combating forest fires and keeping their lives and livelihoods intact. So what were some of the key elements of the project? We worked very closely with our research team to ensure that the narratives were backed by data and the solutions we highlighted were scientifically accurate. While the data substantiated the community stories, the lived experiences of people also made the data points from our research more relatable and accessible. And these data points were always present in each of the films that we made. Each of the stories or the films also ended with a recommendation on the way forward as a takeaway from the film. And the films were captured primarily in regional languages. So apart from Hindi, the languages we used included Malayalam, Marathi, Odia, and Garhwali from different parts of the country. And we ensured that the films were also only 3 to 4 minutes long, considering the declining attention spans today. The films were released in the run-up to COP27 in 2022, and they were also presented at the UNFCCC Global Stocktake Creative Space at Sharm el-Sheikh last year. And the films have also been screened in numerous educational institutions, corporates, international cultural centers, and film and literary festivals across India. The project also, in fact, inspired 3 videos by the World Economic Forum based on the stories from some of the films, and a blog was also put together based on some of these, climate adaptation stories from India's grassroots. The project also got recognitions and awards at several film festivals. It also got a lot of media coverage in, English, Hindi, and some regional languages, including the CN Traveler, as you can see here. So moving away from the project a bit, everything is basically a communications problem, right? Through Faces of Climate Resilience, we were trying to address the communication problem by giving agency to communities to tell their success stories to the world about their climate adaptation practices and how they were building resilience. And strategic communication is a key part of solving any challenge, in climate change is no different here. But despite the overwhelming scientific evidence supporting climate change, have we made it a dinner table conversation? The sad answer is no in most cases, right? Transparency and accountability are largely missing in climate action, and effectively communicating the urgency and importance of taking action is necessary to mobilize sufficient public and political will to address the issue. And with sufficient public backing to move away from business as usual, everything else, including the government and markets, are in all likelihood to follow. So what's missing? What should we do moving forward regarding climate comms or comms in general? So communications is not merely disseminating information, but it's crafting narratives that inspire understanding, empathy, and a collective sense of responsibility. So I'll end with two thoughts or recommendations, and these are not even new ideas. You might have heard them before as well, but we're definitely not doing enough of those. So firstly, we must make climate content entertaining, inspiring, and nudging action. And this requires tapping into pop culture like music, cinema, arts, influencers, and celebrities. One of the previous examples we saw today, where the Barbie movie and the climate stripes were combined, was a very interesting example which fits into this kind of a framework. And secondly, climate communications needs more financial support and better quality of talent to devise strategies and projects that can drive change. While climate research is very well funded, at least in a country like India, climate comms still doesn't have that kind of financial backing. A lot of that still comes from the research funding that we get through. And the most importantly, I think climate comms needs to focus more on solutions, and that should be the focus of the narratives that we have. You can watch the Faces of Climate Resilience by scanning this QR code or by visiting CEEW India on YouTube. Once again, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the CMCC Foundation for this incredible recognition. Thank you.